Thank you very much. I was actually going to write what I was going to say during the questions session, so it's going to be a bit more random even than whatever. First of all, I want to take extreme issue with your use of the word experts for those of us coming now as opposed to the people who came earlier, because actually I've been writing down massively the sort of expertise that they've brought here. I'll admit it, I'm a bureaucrat, so that's where I come from. I write long strategies. I try to convince ministers that the word sustainable development are worth using. I have to say, it's quite interesting when we talk about one planet living. I was originally asked whether I talk about footprinting. I have some very, very techie stuff from the DEFRA statisticians on our view of footprinting. But what I think is really important and really interesting has come out in this session about one planet living is that I don't think methodologically it's the most robust thing in the world. And I don't think we should pretend it is. But one of the things that certainly David Miliband, when he was our Secretary of State, and I think people like Purin Desai, the people at B&Q, the people at Sutton have found is that it is a hugely powerful communications concept. So I think as long as we don't put too much weight on it, then I think it can work very well to capture the fact that we've only got one planet and we need to preserve it. We don't need to overexhaust it by making completely unreasonable demands of its carrying capacity. A lot of what we've been hearing today are fundamentally about the principles of sustainable development. If you look at our 2005 strategy, two things really come out there. The need to ensure a strong, healthy and just society that's compatible with environmental limits. And I think what people here today have been showing is actually how this can be an across-society attempt to bring us back within some of those environmental limits that we're violating. I think the real challenge that comes out is going from the sort of what you might call the passionate pioneers, the people we've had at Bioregional, what we've heard of from Sutton. We have this competition between Sutton and Woking, which is the local authority you always end up going to when you need your sustainability expert. That's one reason why we were so delighted that in the round of local area agreements that were just concluded and signed off in June, that 130 of those actually contain climate change indicators. Those were completely new to local government as part of the local area agreement set. So a huge, big grassroots movement from local government. The legislative framework may be confused, to pick up Craig's point, but at least it's beginning to be there, which I think is a real big gain. I mean, you know, this is a week since the climate change bill became the Climate Change Act. Ed Miliband was speaking to the CBI yesterday about the fact that actually carbon budgets are now going to become a way of life in the same way as after the sort of gorging of public expenditure in the 1970s, which some of you will be too young to remember, the government started placing cash limits on what government departments could spend and achieved a real culture change in the government's approach to financial management. We are now going to start learning to live within carbon budgets, and I think that's going to become quite a shock to the system. So I think that's quite a big start. So the legislative framework may be confused, but 2 or 3 years ago we didn't have a legislative framework, so I think that's actually quite a big win. I'll have to see what our new colleagues in the Department of Energy and Culture and Climate Change, I was going to call it culture change, maybe they should call it that, Department of Energy and Climate Change, actually how they make that really happen. That's a big challenge for them, rather than a big challenge for me. I think the other thing we've got to do, though, is keep hold of this agenda through the economic downturn. In the summer in DEFRA, we did a lot of quite earnest work about what was going to be the implication. Then we thought of a sort of dual crunch. And Craig put it very well, I think, with a bit about the resource crunch and the credit crunch. The events since the collapse of Lehman Brothers in September, I think, have meant that the credit crunch has overwhelmed the way people are now addressing this crisis. And they've really lost sight of the resource crunch, the food price crunch, the energy crunch that really dominated or shared the headlines through the summer. When we ran a session on this within DEFRA, we decided we'd better sort of choice edit. That's a sort of word we haven't quite heard yet today. We decided we'd better choice edit some of the conclusions because it almost sounded as though DEFRA officials were about to say that the recession was the best thing ever that could happen to the DEFRA agenda. And we don't think we really want to be that. It's not a good place to be. But what we are seeing is the credit crunch, the resource crunch, beginning to catalyze some of the behavior changes that we need to move to a more sustainable trajectory. But I think there's a real danger in that. One of the things is if, for example, people start reviewing their relationship with their cars, reviewing their propensity to fly, thinking about food more carefully, food waste more carefully, all those sorts of things, purely in the context of an economic downturn, I think the real danger is that when we see a recovery, people will start thinking that actually this is the time to readopt the habits that they associate with better times. So I think there's a real challenge now, as Kevin was saying earlier, to make the more sustainable choices, not just what you do when things look a bit grim, but actually some positive choices that actually bring benefits. I just want to come at the end to why I think some of these initiatives here are so exciting, particularly really the place-based ones. There is a real danger that the transition towards one planet living means incremental misery at an individual level with no commensurate gain. Everything you're asking everybody to do is a bit more pain, and it's getting in the way of the choices you would want to make, or it's a bit more expensive, it's a bit more annoying. I think we've got to get into a position where actually, for me on my own, it might be a bit more annoying. For me, and I'm afraid, Kevin, at a holistic systems level, for me, if lots of us together make different choices, there are a whole bunch of new opportunities open up, and actually we can get to something that is genuinely better than what went before and also consistent with environmental limits. That's all I wanted to say by way of talking about frameworks and enabling and stuff like that, and now I'll pass over to some real experts.